Hello and welcome to Project Natter. Joining me on this video is Caroline Stevens. We're going to be taking a look at the coronavirus, 5G and population control. For those of you who aren't too familiar with Caroline Stevens, some say she's the female David Icke, a bit of a conspiracy theorist. When I first met her, I wasn't too sure about her. She took me to a meeting about 5G, and a lot of the stuff that we were talking about in this meeting that was brought up came apparent about a year or so later. So I'm pretty much hooked now on Caroline Stevens' videos, and so for those who are watching who are not too sure, or probably not too familiar with yourself, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little about who you are.
Okay, well, Caroline Stevens, got my own YouTube channel, Seeking the Truth, my own website, carolinestevens.net. I'm a mum, primarily, a housewife, and these are the important jobs. But on the side, basically, before I was a mum, I worked in insurance, and then went to university and retrained as a maths teacher, did that for a couple of years, and then I entered the political field in 2013. My goodness me, was that a rude awakening or what? And I stood for Parliament, and I remember going to some of the hustings for 2015 general election, and I just listened to the other politicians around me on the same platform, and I just thought, wow, it's the prerequisite is actually to tell lies and not get away with it. And I found it quite astonishing. And after that, I was very much into networking. And after the general election of 2015, where I kept my deposit, I got the coveted role of campaign manager for the referendum. So here we are now, referendum campaign manager, finally, after failing to get a council seat, after failing to get elected into Parliament like all the other 650 people alongside me in my party at the time, I succeeded in something. We got to vote to leave. So I used to go around the country and help the activists, keep them on the same page, and I would educate them insofar as in training sessions, because that's what I was, a teacher. So I talked to them about the European arrest warrant, which we keep talking about, and this shows that we are still part of the European Union. We comply under the Napoleonic Code rather than our own English constitution, and I see no change in that at the moment.
So under your opinion, you think we haven't left the European Union? We're still under EU rule?
I see that until we have a decent parliament who has the people's interests at their heart, whilst the UK is a corporation, we are constrained by the requirements of the banksters and the global corporations.
Right, Caroline Stevens, she's got her own YouTube channel, so check her out, Caroline Stevens Seeking the Truth. I'll leave a link to your YouTube channel below here so people can come check you out. In this video, we're just going to talk about the coronavirus, 5G and population control. So we'll just take a look at the coronavirus. In your opinion, do you think that the coronavirus is biologically manufactured by the globalist elites to cut down, population, bring down the numbers?
You mean under the UN Agenda 2030?
Yes, I've heard a video of you to speak about this. So, what's your thoughts?
Okay, well, it's not conspiracy theory. I mean, everything that I talk about can be verified. People only have to use their search engine on the internet, put in UN Agenda 2030. The UN is the global corporation elite that runs the world, or they think they run the world, and they are above the EU. The EU is just like a conduit for the United Nations. So the fact that we may or may not have left fully the EU, then that's really, it's a side issue, because in actual fact, there's a oh, what I was going to say, a darker demon waiting to pounce, and we're already working through the UN Agenda 2030. It's all in 17 points. You can find it on the internet. Part of it is to get us all moved into smart cities, and we can see that we've got the floods here, we've got the fires in Australia. Australians, they're our brothers and sisters, and so I think we're the last bastion, really. If we fall, we are actually, if anybody would like to Google what British and Britain means, we're actually the holders of God's covenant. And that is what is so, so important. It's interesting, City of London, you're from London, I know you don't live in the city, do you, as such? But the City of London does not actually comply necessarily with the EU. It doesn't actually form part of the UK at all. Were you aware of that?
That's correct, yeah. So the City of London is its own entity, and I believe it was made its own entity. I think it was after the invasion of 1066 with King Harold and William after they, I think it came about around that time. It became a separate entity. So
they've got their own police force and everything, haven't they?
Same as the Vatican in Rome. It's exactly the same. It's a mirror of.
And Washington DC.
Okay.
These are the three areas that don't fall.
Okay.
Right. So, forgotten where we were going now. So coronavirus. So part of this UN agenda is to depopulate the world. Because if you and I were part of the 1%, we've got everything we need.
Yeah.
You know, we've got a garage full of cars. Yeah. We've got X number of swimming pools, we've got families all over the place if we want to have, and we just jet around the world. We don't care about air miles and carbon footprints. It affects everybody else, it doesn't affect us.
Yeah.
So how would we divide the world? Well, we'd get races, different colours of people fighting out amongst themselves. We would have people, football matches.
The divide and conquer approach. Yeah.
Definitely, divide and conquer. Right with the newspapers, we were talking earlier before we came on air, we were talking about reading different newspapers. Well, if I get the chance and I have the money or I have the facilities, I would gladly read the Telegraph, the Guardian, Sun, the Mirror, Mail, Express, and so on. I'll even occasionally read the New European, because you have to see every situation from different perspectives. Yeah,
because exactly as we were saying, we had a conversation just before this video, and we're saying, I look at every single news channel possible, and somewhere amongst those news channels is the truth. You know, you can come to your own conclusion. Everyone's got their own agenda and their own ideas.
Today, one of on the front page of the Telegraph, they were talking about the immigration policy. So one of the ideas of coming out of the EU was for us to be able to control our immigration. But we're then leaving that in the hands of our government, the likes of Boris Johnson and Priti Patel. But if you read the small print, remember, the devil is always in the detail. They're allowing unlimited immigration. Okay, maybe not for the fruit pickers anymore, but then perhaps they don't need so many fruit pickers because of mechanisation and the working classes have been struggling. It's now time to attack the middle classes.
So, in your opinion, with the coronavirus situation that we're seeing now, it's gone from an epidemic to a pandemic overnight.
Just shows how easy and quick it can happen.
Do you think this is to do with population control, or do you think this is monetization to sell drugs and stuff? As I was saying to you before, my girlfriend, she went to Dubai for a week, and when she left, went to get some antibacterial gel from the shop. The shelf was completely empty. You can't buy any antibacterial gel in London, at least anyway. We went to a few shops, it's gone. We know that masks, the face masks, have been flying off the shelves. In London, I've seen on the tube, I took a photo, I'll put it up now so you can see. There's a Chinese group of Chinese people on the tube, all wearing face masks, stuff like that. People are taking it very seriously, and I think that they should, which is a good thing, because it will help stop it spreading. We've seen, according to the BBC, we've seen a boost in inquiries into private jets. People want to fly on their own private jets. It's all right if you've got the money, and it doesn't affect you, like you were saying.
But no doubt about it, with this agenda, you were saying, is it monetarization or is it just to eliminate people? I would say it's both. You're going to get a certain percentage of the population being wiped out, and then you've got to capitalise on the rest. So we've only just seen how Matthew Hancock has put money into funding for the coronavirus. This is money that we could have spent elsewhere, but it hasn't been spent elsewhere. We're seeing him spending that money, whereas we've got also in the papers at the same time, people who have been flooded out, some of them for the nth time now. Please don't rely on the government to help you. Right, so what is the point of paying our taxes if our government's not there to help us? But it's actually now, it's quite evident now that the government is speaking on behalf of Big Pharma.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you. And the situations with, like within China, you sent me a link earlier about Jaguar receiving their parts in China. They've knocked that. You've got.
Well, they've got Jaguar's only got like 2 weeks left, haven't it? Is it?
So yeah, I believe so. But the thing is, again, everything's made in China. So we've seen in China factories shut down. Tesla, Apple, Samsung, Google, Microsoft. And speaking of Microsoft, Bill Gates, who is involved with, should we say, the medication of of groups. We saw what happened in Africa. Basically.
It's involved in all the vaccines, isn't it? Vaccine programs. How can you put the vaccine programs in the hands of one globalist?
Correct me if I'm wrong, there was a situation in Africa not so long ago where they were giving injections or vaccines, what we call them injections, to people that therefore some virus, and they turned out to be sterilisation injections, and they actually sterilised people in the local towns.
Well, look at in the UK, we've got our children now at secondary school been subjected to vaccines that we were never subjected to.
Yeah.
And now we're talking about children becoming sterile by the mid-20s. And there's no link. This has been going on for say 10 years now. There's no link between this incident and this. So basically Britain, USA, Australia, the people of our country are the ones, I believe, it's their mission now to wipe us out. And we've seen the Huguenots being wiped out in France, pretty much, and we're the last stand. This is the final battle.
I see, so last night I was doing a bit of research to come before I was coming here today to speak with you, and there was, I think it was on Twitter, so it was the Director General of the World Health Organization, which is the United Nations Health Agency. He said there are now 804 cases in 25 different countries with 3 deaths. So this is coming straight from the World Health Organization. As I was going through, I come across the Sun newspaper. I'm not a big fan of the Sun, but one of the articles in there was that there was 1,874 dead and over 72,436 cases globally. 78 Brits are on board this cruise ship, and there's been a couple now that have been diagnosed with it and whatnot, and officials have been looking into the situation, the way it was handled. So I think on the ship there was something like 3,000 odd people on the ship.
And they've just been left there in close proximity. And we were just sort of equating that with the UN Agenda 2030, where people are being moved from the rural areas by hook or by crook, flooding or fire, into smart cities. New builds now seem to have either no gardens or no garages. People are being built up on top of each other, and not only is it bad for mental well-being, you need to be charged to the ground. You need to have, you might think this is another conspiracy, but we actually do need to get a charge from terra firma. If you're spending time in high rises day in, day out, then that affects your mental well-being. Did you know that?
No.
You're going to say it's a conspiracy now, aren't
I'm
you?
going to walk around my bare feet in the common.
Absolutely, it's good to do that.
So the way this cruise ship was dealt with. Now we've seen there's like I've got it down here. So there's 543 cases on board. This is according to the Sun. The Sun is saying there's now 503. So now this is now the biggest outbreak outside of China. Now. No other place has such a big outbreak. And this is all on this cruise ship. This is all because they left them on the cruise ship and they quarantined them on the ship. So then the disease was able to spread, the virus was able to spread amongst others much easier, infecting more and more people. Do you think that that's deliberate? Or would you have, I mean, here in the United Kingdom, I know that the Holiday Inn near Heathrow Airport has been shut down
now, hasn't it?
And it's going to be used for coronavirus cases, people coming into the UK so they can quarantine in there. Do you think the ship thing was deliberate? Do you think that's what's your opinion on that?
Absolutely.
To help it spread more?
Exactly, it's got to. And what is really interesting is the fact that the mainstream media have been interviewing one particular couple every other morning on breakfast time television, and that couple now have got it.
Yes.
And so how their families must be feeling. But our British government were, in the same way as you don't see them discussing the floods, they don't go out and visit the floods, and there's a delay there. Why is it that they keep making the wrong decision day in, day out when something's serious, when they're facing something serious?
The government are buying the floods as well?
Well, you see, the floods go back. I mean, when I first went into politics was 2013, and very shortly after that, there was the serious floods on the Somerset Levels, which are not too far away from here. And it then came to light that it was the EU regulations, together with the RSPB, and a certain baroness who had a foot in both camps and was being strategically placed from one
to
the
baroness.
She's a Baroness Young, and she was associated with the RSPB, and then, DEFRA, they didn't do the dredging, and they wanted the birds to have, there's basically the flatlands are next door to where the flooding is. So when there's too much rain, if it could be engineered that we had extra rain in certain areas, then there was nowhere for that rain to go to. If you've got wetlands next door, it's already wet, so there's not going to be any absorption.
So seeing this case with the cruise ship, and I've seen, I believe it was a professor, it was in The Guardian, so I'll pop that up on the screen as well. In The Guardian there was a post about, I think it was a professor from the Imperial College, and he said without it being tackled immediately, 60% of the global population could be infected by the coronavirus. So if you go back to like the Spanish flu, there was like 50 million cases of it globally, even on rural little areas and islands and whatever. And that's before planes. We've got planes flying in, flying out constantly now, and ships, cruise ships, is a perfect example.
Of course, we have open door immigration.
Of this, yes.
Still.
It's still.
Remember, we're still in the transition period.
Yeah.
Everything is as it was last year.
Nothing changes, is it? Yeah.
No.
Cover up. So, with respect to the Chinese government, the Chinese Communist government, we've seen with social media, we know that Facebook's banned. I'm not a fan of Facebook anyway. They're not a fan of free speech. They've removed posts from social media, and there was some Chinese journalist citizens. Basically, they were going around taking photographs and videos in Wuhan. They were showing how big the problem was. The government at the time, I think they said there was like 80 people had been affected, but it's a communist government, so you could tell up to about 8,000. But they were saying there was thousands of bodies. They spoke to nurses that said that they couldn't cope with the number of people coming in, blah, blah. So the two guys that went around doing this, taking these photographs and speaking to nurses and hospitals and whatnot, have disappeared. They were visited by the police, the doors were kicked in and they haven't been seen since. The doctor, who's the whistleblower, so he was talking about this outbreak in early January. He was warned by the police that he would be punished for speaking out publicly. And he's
like
died of the virus. Do you think that's a coincidence?
Well, I mean, it's not so dissimilar in this country, and I think it's about time people realise that there are many parallels, that we are encountering global communism in the UK like never before. We have got the box in the corner that produces one script.
Here's what we want you to think.
Yeah, they will speak as if, well, of course, you know, global climate change is happening and da 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 da. They don't query anything of their own, you know, but they will query you, or they won't even let the opposite side have a say. So, where we're going with this, we've got in the UK, communism is brought in by education. We already have huge percentage of the population where both parents or the single parent goes out to work. So the parents cannot possibly have the control, dare I say it, over their children that they used to have before. Whether by look or design, they cannot it's not physically possible to be in two places at one time. So you have many more children going into the nursery school system from the age of 2, say. Okay. And of course, children often go to childminders as well. You've got now the LGBT agenda that is part of this annihilation of the population, because why not make sure that most of the population are either sterile, they're not going to have children, because they actually are going to choose a different sex to what they have been maybe think they are biologically. They at 4 they could be faced with talking about their own gender at age 4. You are just busy working out how to eat your packed lunch or have your school dinner, or working out. I mean, just think about it. I don't know if you remember, I mean, because I've got children, and it's not so long ago that the kids at primary school would be sat on a mat. You'd have the entire class squished on this mat, and they would be doing something called show and tell. Well, the LGBT agenda would actually give a totally different perspective on show and tell, potentially. And you know, you've got kids squished up, and what happens if you just happen to, you know, if you are not a model child, but one that conforms exactly to what the government is expecting you to conform to, you can end up, I mean, I heard the other day a child with autism from the age of 4 or 5 was caught kissing another child. The child had autism. That child, apparently, now put on a sex offenders register. Did you see that? I read it, for the rest of their lives.
I did see that.
Hello, wake up, Great Britain. This is, you've got children, you've got grandchildren.
It's crazy, absolutely crazy. Do you think this is all to do with the population control, like we just said? So if they're pushing an agenda of like homosexuality, for instance, they're not potentially themselves. Obviously, you're going to be repopulating.
I mean, I went to.
Do you think that's why they're doing it?
Absolutely, and I mean, I remember going to a church event, and they were collecting money for a charity called, I think it's called Jeans for Jeans.
Okay, I think I've seen that,
Yeah, and so as far as I could tell, this, I mean, having worked in insurance, isn't that just fantastic for the elites to find out what are the weaknesses in your DNA?
Yeah. So my girlfriend a couple of years ago, she bought me a DNA kit from Ancestry.com to use, and I was like, yeah, you know what? In my youth, I was.
You did it, didn't you?
I was a bit. No, I didn't. But in my youth, I used to get into a bit of trouble, and I've been arrested a few times, and they've taken my DNA, so they have my DNA. So in that perspective, I'm tempted, but I haven't done it. It's been sitting on the shelf all this time, and I still haven't done it because I'd like to see your roots. I'm interested in that. But it says they hold on to your DNA, they keep hold of it on the database, right? So I don't really want to hand over my DNA. It's the most precious bit of information that you have, like you were saying. They can find out all your weaknesses, everything about it.
And then that's what happens is then you see when you take out an insurance policy, this is my sort of area of expertise from like 30 or 40 years ago now. 30 years ago, I should say. I'm making myself older than what I sound.
You don't look a day over 21.
Thank you. So the insurance companies, they basically often offer cover to people up to a certain age without providing medical details. But if your name got flagged up in a database...
DNA, oh look, he's prone for this, you might get that.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And your insurance people, they might not cover you. The insurance premiums could be so cost prohibitive. And it has greater ramifications that I don't even want to go into on this show.
We've seen with like what you just touched on there, within like the communist element within inside our country and how things are, and we've seen videos online of police knocking on people's doors, telling them to be mindful about what they write on social media. It isn't even a criminal offence, but the police are going around to people's houses telling them to be mindful about what they're writing. So it just shows you, I mean, you'd expect that kind of stuff in North Korea or China, you could understand it being in a communist regime. I myself, as you know, have been banned from Facebook, completely removed for running a Brexiteers page. I know you've been banned on several occasions.
I've been banned for 5 months for posting in groups.
I just think with Twitter now. So
that's a minefield as well, Twitter.
But also, I was just about to touch on this. So on Twitter, it was Zero Edge. They posted an article about the coronavirus, and they were explaining or a theory of the coronavirus being, I believe, made in a laboratory in Canada, and then moved from Canada to China, to Wuhan, where then it was then released at the fish market, where everyone's caught it, and then they said that the virus itself is nothing similar to any other coronavirus out there, i.e. SARS. It's more similar to cases from the HIV strand, okay, and the way to treat it is using HIV medication. So Twitter went bang, removed their account, deleted them. If you go on, you can't even find them now on Twitter. It's an absolute joke. So freedom of speech in this country's gone. Then there's an article was going out there saying exactly the same thing. The Daily Mail said about it being released from a lab. The Daily Mail were allowed to post that. And then there was an article, I believe, in The Guardian. I'll put these pictures up now so you can see. And in The Guardian, I think it was in The Guardian, they said about Japan are using HIV medication to treat the patients with coronavirus. So everything that Zero Edge had said, now all the other media outlets are now saying, but when they said it first, they were removed from social media.
Well, actually, that's quite funny, actually, because when you said to me about going to that meeting and you thought, oh gosh, Caroline's possibly lost it, and I know that at that point I had quite a following from the political, I had a political following. But because over the months I've pointed out that the UK is a corporation, the ballot box is rigged, there is no point in voting, you're only giving your consent, that political following is just gone. But in its place, I've got a truth following. And now, obviously, once a person's blocked you or you've blocked them, they've gone, and they're not likely to come back and say, Caroline, you were right. But hopefully some of that, hopefully there will be some more momentum gathering now because people are knowing about 5G. I mean, you know what the reaction was like at that meeting 18 months ago about talking about 5G. You saw the way that people were their minds were framed at the time.
It's funny how now we see with America with Trump, they've what's the Chinese company? Is it Wuhi or something? They've now got a contract for 5G in the UK. Boris has allowed that. In America, they wouldn't do it.
Huawei or Huawei.
Huawei or
Huawei. Yeah, my phone's
so they basically they didn't want them in America because they were spies, but here no problem.
It's okay.
Yeah.
And also, of course, we're now looking at potentially China taking over the HS2. So China. We actually, if you analyse what we actually own, our utilities, our travel companies, they're all foreign owned.
Sold us out.
We've been sold out. So all this, and interestingly enough, you know, our politicians, all of them, whether they're in Parliament or not, are really, really keen to say we're the, I don't know, the second most, fifth best global economy in the world. Yeah. And in actual fact, what they failed to cover, and this is where the devil's in the detail, we actually, to cover our liabilities, we have got less than 1% in assets to cover the government's liabilities.
Well, this is what we were saying about earlier about digital wage. Money's being phased out, so there'll be no more cash payments. Everything will be digital, and it'll be much easier to control once things are digital. Payments are then just literally numbers. You can just create out of thin air, nice and easy.
We're getting to a tipping point. We're seeing this now in Australia, where the government is very keen to put cash bans. And if you think you might want to buy a second-hand car, you might want to buy a caravan, a little boat, especially if you're in Australia, perhaps, and you cannot use cash anymore for these purchases. So they will use this excuse that it's to do with combat money laundering. But in actual fact, most of the money laundering in the UK actually happens in the city of London.
It certainly does, and you've got guys walking around in suits in central London, robbing millions of pounds from people every day of the week, and you've got people working hard, breaking their backs, struggling to get by, and they have their freedoms taken off them every second of the day. There's a new freedom going, like you were just saying, with this whole agenda, the whatever it is now, LGBTQZ, whatever they
LGBT agenda.
They keep adding more and more initials to
People
it.
need to get to their school gates and stop this. And I don't care whether, and of course then you'll get people who are joining the crowds, and then they'll say, oh, you can't be here because you haven't got children at this school.
Yeah.
But we have to do something. And I know we'll probably have a lot of veterans watching this show, and it's our futures, our families are all based on how successful our children's lives will be. We brought them into this world, and actually it's our duty, it's our moral duty to make sure that our government doesn't take their childhood away from them.
I think what we've got to do is like you were saying, we've all got to come together to fight this globalist agenda, and we've got the news-wise, I was saying, you've got to look at every news channel going, and then somewhere in the middle you'll find the truth. Like I was saying earlier about the terrorist attack that took place in Tooting Bec, you've got the Daily Mail reports it, terrorist attack taking place in South London, 6 people stabbed, 2 possible dead, suspect shot dead. The BBC, incident, South London, man killed. If you used to go off that headline, what would you know? Nothing. So these are the sort of things we need to tackle. So I think we need to get rid of the TV licence, make that a subscription-free only basis.
But I wonder if the reason why Boris is for this is simply because the elites now believe that it's job done, it's game over.
I think that Boris Johnson has seen how popular UKIP were in being successful in the beginning, pushing for the EU referendum, which then we won the referendum. There were 17.4 million of us that came out and voted to the. They've seen how popular that party was, and one of their policies was the Australian-style immigration system, They're now pushing for that. Another policy was the TV license, to scrap the TV license.
But the devil is
that.
in the detail. See the front page of the Telegraph today, followed on by page 2, I think it was, Boris Johnson and Priti Patel with this Australian policy of immigration. But it says unlimited numbers of people can come into this country who are nurses and who are people in the building trade and people who perhaps might not necessarily have been classed as hyper-skilled are being fit into this category. So your middle class, your upper middle, there is the middle classes now that are going to be destroyed. They've already got a huge swathe of the population onto universal credit. And the biggest scandal is the House of Lords has no power at all. But the media propagate this myth that they're a waste of space. The reason why they're a waste of space is twofold. It's primarily because of the 1911 Parliament Act, which was superseded or basically changed a bit in 1948, which meant that they really didn't have many powers left. And the 1992 House of Lords Act, which removed all but 92 hereditary peers out of the House of Lords. So people think, oh, hereditary peers, oh, they're posh, they've got lots of money, they don't care about us. Well, hang on, at least some of them did care about the British people because they used to look after their workers. What have we got now today? We've got them being replaced by global corporations, people, the elites, who really do not care at all about the people from this country. So it has not been for any benefits. So House of Lords, they get £323 a day now, and the universal credit
and they sit there asleep.
have nothing to do because they have no power, and yet we've got people looking for jobs on universal credit and they get less in a month than somebody in the House of Lords gets in a day. Is that the 21st century Britain that we applaud? And the only people that seem to be sympathetic to the government are strangely the people from the City of London.
So, final thoughts, globalist agenda, globalist elites, where do you see, what's the end game, what's their final end game? Is it total control over the people, they dumb down the population, make the population smaller, dumb the people, control everything and everyone?
Financial catastrophe as well. You know, please don't think that there's going to be any money in the pension pot. There's lots of black holes out there. Just make sure you don't fall into one.
Right, well, thanks for coming on, Caroline. We'll wrap it up there.
Thank you,
Appreciate
David.
your time. And if you're watching, please make sure you check out Caroline Stevens' YouTube channel. It's Caroline Stevens Seeking the Truth. I'll leave a link to that below the video.
And my website, carolinestevens.net.
There you go.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching, guys.